what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to show you my Magicka DK beginner build for the Ascending Tides DLC patch. As a part of the beginner setup series, I'll be focusing on a starting rotation and gear that are all easily accessible. For the sake of this theme and to be as new player friendly as possible, I'll be avoiding mythics, arena weapons, trial, or dungeon gear. Furthermore, the rotation for many classes will be simplified. This build is capable of pulling over 82k on the parse dummy and is viable for most starting content. The build specializes in normal group content such as trials, vet dungeons, and group arenas. This build works great in overland but is not specifically designed for it. Furthermore, I'll be going over some ideas and tips to further progress yourself into mid and end game. Although hybrid builds are some of the strongest builds right now, I'll be focusing on a more traditional setup that either focuses on magic or stamina. So with that intro being said, here we go. So starting off in the character sheet, I have 64 points into Magicka, and I'm running the Thief Mundus. For the race, I am a High Elf. Other alternatives include Dark Elf, Khajiit, and maybe even Brennan would be fine. For consumables, we're going to be using Clockwork Citrus Fillet for any hard content. A cheaper and almost just as good alternative will be Witch Mother's Potent Brew, and if you're parsing or just need more sustain but can sacrifice the health, Ghastly Eyeball is always the go-to. Moving on to potions, so for potions we're just going to be running standard Essence of Spell Power. Essence of Spell Power is important in that it gives access to 3 major buffs that are important for Magicka DPS. These include Major Sorcery, Major Prophecy, and Major Intellect. Please keep in mind that these potions do cost a bit to make and or buy, so make sure you have 3 points in medicinal use located from the alchemy skill line to make sure you benefit from the potions for the full duration. So for CP we're going to be running Fighting Finesse, Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, and Backstabber. For the red tree we're going to be running Boundless Vitality, Rejuvenation, Siphoning Spells, and Sustained by Suffering. Beginner series, I decided to change the gear set a little bit. We're going to be running Julianos 5-piece with Hunning's 5-piece and 2-piece Night Mother. So breaking it down, we're going to start off with 2 daggers of Julianos. Main hand is Nirnhoned and offhand is charged. If you don't have access to Nirnhoned, you can just make that either charged or precise. Doesn't make too big of a difference. Make sure you have Nirnhoned in the main hand slot and poison damage enchant. Offhand is going to be charged with a flame damage enchant. On the back bar we're running an Inferno Staff with Julianos infused with an increased weapon and spell damage enchant. For the head and shoulders we're going to be running 2 pieces of Night Mother, both in medium with Max Mag traded in Divines. And for the body we have 5 pieces of Hunning's Rage, all crafted in light with Max Mag glyphs traded in Divines. And for jewelry we're going to be running 3 pieces of Julianos jewelry, all with Bloodthirsty, all pieces of jewelry with spell damage glyphs. So for skills we're running Burning Embers, Molten Whip, Engulfing Flames, Flames of Oblivion, Barb Trap, Flawless Dawnbreaker, Degeneration, Unstable Wall of Fire, Eruption, Scalding Rune, Inner Light, and Standard of Might. So for this patch I did change the rotation a little bit and made it a little bit more simple. We're going to start off with a Degeneration, Unstable Wall of Fire, Eruption, Scalding Rune, and then we're going to bar swap into a Burning Embers, Engulfing Flames, Flames of Oblivion, Barb Trap, and 6 whips. Whenever your ultimate Standard of Might is ready, just drop it in place of one of your whips, preferably the first one, and that's it. In terms of progression, I definitely work on replacing Hunnings for Mother Sorrow as my first step. Mother Sorrow is a really good set and it's super easy to get considering it drops from Deshawn. For a basic beginner setup, it would be Mother Sorrow and Julianos paired with a monster set. For this particular setup, I'd recommend either Stormfist or Maul the Inferno as the monster helms because Tempest Island and Banisel 2 on Vet isn't too difficult and the sets are very strong. Next, you have the choice of replacing your Mother Sorrow and Julianos. From here is moving towards mid to end game. Basai from the Trial Rock Grove is a really strong set, but does require running Rock Grove, which is a trial. Running it on normal is very easy and you should work on getting it if possible. I'd also like to point out that Reliquin on body is also becoming popular and it's perfect for hybrid builds. Regardless of which set you choose, you need to choose another set to pair it with. I like to call these front bar sets. These can be Kinra, Pillar of Nirn, Zogvin, and Advancing Yokeda. Please note that most of these sets are in medium, so you'd have to run it on weapon and jewelry. Unless you're doing a hybrid setup, then you can run it on the body. But I definitely recommend running these, especially for traditional setup, on your jewelry and weapons. From this list, I think Kinra is the best option, granted you're able to keep the stacks. Kinra comes from the dungeon Black Drake Villa, Pillar of Nirn comes from Falkreath Hold, Advancing Yokeda comes from Hellraw Citadel, the Trial, and Zobgen comes from Frostvault. I'd also like to mention that Zobgen is unique in that it allows us to run a different skill instead of Trap, freeing up a bar slot. Next is the Mythic route and Maelstrom Arena weapon. For Maelstrom Arena weapon, getting an Inferno staff on the back bar is probably the best choice, unless, as I said earlier, you're going for a hybrid build. Then in that case, Great Sword would probably work better. Mythics is kind of a pain to get, but they are some of the strongest items in the game. If you are going to be running a Mythic, I'd go for a One Piece Slime Crawl Monster Helm paired with Harpooner's Waiting Kilt as the Mythic. Harpooner's is viable for most content and is best in slot for that content. A good alternative will always be Death Dealer's Fate, and I also like to include that if you're doing solo content, Ring of the Pale Order is such a lifesaver. For monster helms, if you want to skip the Mythic route, we have a few options, but Stormfist, Kjarnar, and Maul Inferno are my personal picks, and I think that wraps it up. So closing thoughts per usual. First off, if you don't like daggers, you can always swap to an Inferno staff. Daggers do pull ahead in DPS, but you do sacrifice the range, so they both have their pros and cons. So another thing to note is the reason why I set up the bars like I did was to make sure I cut out as many bar swaps as possible. So therefore you're basically on one bar and then you swap to the next bar, cast all the skills, and vice versa. And this rotation makes it a lot more simple. On top of that, just a quick note, I was running Unstable Wall of Fire, but for a rotation like this, I think the other morph, Elemental Blockade, would be better just because of the increased duration, and that increased duration actually lines up pretty well with our other dots. I'm also going to take this time to just point out a few things that Magdks do make really good support classes, if not the best. One of the most notoriously famous sets that Magdks can run is Zen's Redress. You don't need to really worry about being a support DPS unless you're doing high-end trials, but I did want to point that out, and I think that wraps it up. That wraps up the build explanation section of this portion. As always, thank you for watching my video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Come join our Discord, by the way. Link is in the description. As a reminder, if this video helped in any way, please help the channel grow by subscribing, and if you like the piggies, like the video, feel free to stick around for an attached parse. If not, have a good day and thank you again.